Hey guys, Michaela Williams here, and today I'm really excited to be talking about our issue today because I'm gonna basically slam various misconceptions and stereotypes surrounding eating disorders and mental disorders in general from the perspective of somebody who has had one. I know a lot of you out there have probably thought of these things before, maybe said this before to someone suffering from an eating disorder, and so it's good to talk about these things to know what can sometimes be offensive, and it's just there's so many different things that are just not that don't match up for a lot of people when they look at a mental disorder from an outside perspective. So today I'm going to talk about that, and hopefully you'll learn something new. All right, let's get started. So I'm going to go down the list with 4 things, and I'm going to start off with the first one, which is the just stop mentality. I had this said to me before, actually, and it was probably the most offensive thing I've ever heard, just because I think that's probably something that people don't understand, is that, oddly enough, eating disorders have very little to do with food. I know that might sound strange or like counterintuitive, but the fact is that all you've done when someone says, why don't you just stop or something, like if you know that, why don't you just eat, like if you know that you're hurting yourself and you're dying, then why don't you just pick up some food and eat. The fact is that once you start eating or something, a mental disorder and eating disorder in general goes so much deeper than just like not eating and the physical effects. You're mentally tormented all the time by the demons in your head, and basically the eating disorder, like changing the chemicals in your brain and making you think differently. So all you've done when you make someone, like force someone to eat or something, is all you've done is take away the numbing power. A lot of the time with any addiction in general, whether it be a drug, whether it be alcohol, or whether it be whatever you would have, food in this case, it numbs pain, it numbs just uncomfortable feelings. And so with someone with an eating disorder, if they're trying to numb something out, then just eating the food or so does not do anything to take away the actual eating disorder. The eating disorder is still there. So what you're essentially telling someone when you say, why don't you just stop, is, I don't care if you're still suffering. I don't care if you're still going through this mental routine every day of hating yourself and the self-doubt and maybe even engaging in self-harm if it gets to that place. I don't care if that's going on, as long as you are not exhibiting signs outwardly. And so it basically sends a message that I don't care if you suffer internally. Like I said, it's not a lot to do with food. Usually it's insecurities built up underneath. It's things that happen over time. Eating disorders are very, like, it's a lot of things that happen over the course of your life. So when you just stopping that, you can't just stop feeling insecure. It takes as long as it takes to build an eating disorder, and as much time as it takes to build an eating disorder. Usually it takes twice as much time, maybe 4 times as much time to undo it. Same way that you can build, and like you can lose trust in 2 seconds, but it takes forever to build. It's the same way with an eating disorder. You can have an eating disorder and build it up to there, but like to recover from that eating disorder, it takes a really long time. So okay, number 2, and this one is super important. This one is called What ED Looks Like. I remember the reason that I didn't want to come out with my eating disorder to the world was because I knew that I wasn't a bag of bones. I knew that I didn't fit the criteria of a girl that just looked really dangerously thin. I did at one point, for sure, but I had an eating disorder for 4 years. I went from being anorexic to being a binge and murder and going through this whole cycle, my weight changing and cycling back and forth, and so I didn't always look the part of an eating disorder girl or a person in general. And so there's a mentality for a lot of people that you have to be dangerously thin to have an eating disorder. You can be any size and have an eating disorder. You can be any age and have an eating disorder. It doesn't matter. You can be any gender and have an eating disorder. Eating disorders oftentimes they spark from like a trauma or something. A lot of the times it's just successive events over the lifetime that kind of propel it and make that happen. But eating disorders in general, the thing is that you honestly cannot pinpoint what an eating disorder looks like on a certain person, because there was a point in my life where I was consider to be dying, and I didn't look the eating disorder part. So you have absolutely no idea what's actually going on underneath the surface when you're talking to someone with an eating disorder, or when you're talking to people in general. That's just true with people. The fact of the matter is that if you look at like a lot of the guys that I talked to that were in treatment, they struggled with it a lot too, because there's a lot of emphasis. Sure, there's a lot of, particularly with body image, there's a lot of emphasis for women, particularly like in the media, but men suffer from that greatly too, and there's a lot of stigmas and stuff, and they don't really want to come out with their eating disorders because it's almost like the world has some sort of like weird stigma around it, that it's supposed to be like some like flitty teenage girl thing, and like that's not what an eating disorder is, or a mental disorder in general. It's not something made up, it's not a phase, it's not something that can be like quote unquote cured or something in a few small steps. It takes a lot of time and a lot of work, and a lot of help, and that's not help that sometimes they feel comfortable to reach out for. I certainly didn't. I felt like I would be judged by people. I felt like people would think that it hurt to me, especially in the time when body image and stuff was so fragile for me, that it hurt to think that people would look at me and think like, she can't have an eating disorder, she's a like bigger girl, or whatever would come into my mind. Like that stings for a lot of people, and it makes them not want to come out with eating disorders if they do want to come out about their struggles and try to help other people with them. I know particularly for me that was a really big struggle. So ED looks different on everybody. You can be any size and have an eating disorder, and there's a full range of eating disorders too. It's not just anorexia, it's a lot of different, it's binge eating, compulsive eating, there's just so many things. Obviously binging and purging. So never try to release your mind from that stigma, because it's kind of archaic, and I think that it's time that society sees it in a completely different scope. So yeah. Okay, so here's the third thing, and this one is really important because it probably applies to the vast majority of people. This is called the dieting mentality. The definition of health in the Webster's Dictionary and the definition of health in our society are two very different things. They don't match up at all. Health is being free from injury or illness. Health to our society can sometimes mean eating a salad for every meal, never touching chocolate, deprivation, freezing fat, surgeries, whatever, in the name of health. And so in our society, we've created a culture that makes it extremely easy to hide eating disorder behaviors. I'm actually pretty disturbed majority of the time by how many people, like my peers around me, are so absorbed in the way their body looks and their health on a day-to-day basis. And the thing is that I used to have that, I recognize it because I used to have that same fear around food in general. I used to binge particularly on sweets and stuff because I never let myself have sweets. When I did, it would be like all in one. It would be like an obsessive sort of, just a binge. And I think for a lot of people, the notion is that like depravity will like kind of train yourself, but think of it this way. If you have a car that is broken down and you take it to the shop a bunch of times, and no matter what, no one can get this car fixed, would you go then and blame yourself and say that you're a horrible person, you didn't do your job, you didn't take care of it, if the car just doesn't work? No, obviously not. You would maybe blame the shop man, maybe just blame the car. But with diets, we get into this mentality that somehow it's our fault when a diet doesn't work. And it's not our fault, because your body does go into sort of a starvation mode. And so it's super, super important to realize and put your health back into perspective, because there's a lot of times where we're claiming health and engaging in a lot of very extreme ends to maintain that health and to achieve that health, and none of that is healthy. That's not the name of health. And so now, I mean, this is just from my personal experience, so this is just what I recommend, is to try to do the best you can to remove your fear around food. If you have like a food that you generally stay away from, try to have it like more often or so. Like I make sure I have a sweet a day now, just because like if I don't, then I build up that like resistance to it again and that like fear around it. And so there's a extreme between depravity health and actual health. So it's just really easy. We need to recognize when people say like recovered enough. You can easily be hiding eating disorder behaviors and telling yourself that you don't have an eating disorder, you're not building anything up, but still living in those extremes and living in that depravity and living without really allowing yourself to enjoy these things, which it's possible. It really is possible. I didn't think it was, but that's where I'm at right now. So I know it's possible and you can get there. Okay, the last one is also really important. This one is the addiction factor. A lot of the people don't see eating disorders as an addiction. It's a very particular addiction, because the thing is that with alcohol or with a drug or something, it's a substance. It's a physical substance that you abstain from, and it's really, really hard because the same way it changes the chemicals in your brain and stuff. But with an eating disorder, it's kind of like taking a tiger for a walk 3 times a day, 3 or more times a day, because every time you eat, you have to go through this sort of routine of like helping coach yourself. You can't stop eating, so you have to deal with it. You have to confront your demons constantly. So it's a really terrifying thing. And with any addiction, it takes a really long time because you have to treat all the psychological damage first. Usually when you act out something, there's an emotion behind it. And with any eating disorder, the emotion behind it sometimes is fear, fear of rejection, insecurity, unstableness, just there's so many different things, like distrust, and a lot of the time with an eating disorder, there's a lot of just damage that needs to be dealt with before. That is the underlying issue. That is the real underlying issue. That's why you go into a lot of therapy and a lot of analysis into basically your whole life. The first thing that we did when I went into treatment was they made you write a life story, like an autobiography. And so you can kind of trace your eating disorder throughout your whole life and see how it happened and read it to other people so that they can like kind of visualize it too and kind of put the pieces together. So it is an addiction. My therapist explained it to me in this way, which was really helpful because I honestly didn't see it this way. When you do a repetitive action and you release endorphins, which is like the happy drug or so, the natural happy drug in your brain, there's like fissures in your brain, and they form extra pockets for that endorphins and for those endorphins. And so when they're not filled, they send a message that they need to be filled, and like the chemical messages that makes you crave it, makes you have to do it again. So there actually is, and if there's a way that purging particularly can become an endorphin release or an adrenaline release. So sometimes if there's like stress or anxiety or something, that's why a lot of people turn to purging in an eating disorder, because they get that endorphin release and those extra fissures are filled. So just something to think about, that they are an addiction. It's a pretty scary addiction, because you do get hooked on that and you get reliant on that to be your sort of emotional balance in a way. But yeah, there's definitely a strong addictive power in any eating disorder. Okay guys, that's basically it. If you have any comments or questions for me or anything to discuss and you just want to talk about, you can comment below and you can subscribe for more videos later. But yeah, just remember to be sensitive and to respect those around you, and I hope you learned something new. I hope you walk away with something new. But yeah, thank you guys so much. I'll see you around.